welcome everybody to tonight's edition of Monterey Bay Connect. For those of you who haven't been with us for a little while, we used to be the Monterey Bay Tech Meetup. We have changed our name to Monterey Bay Connect. Welcome all. So I can see my screen here. Give me a moment to do a little reorganization. There we go. Put that over there. And let's roll forward into our program for the evening. In case you didn't notice, we're on Zoom. We're still on Zoom. It continues forever.
It's nice to have a constant.
You can ask questions using the chat icon on the bottom of your screen. Love to have you put questions into chat. We will monitor those and ask them. You can send private messages if you want by selecting particular individuals. Best way to view this is to stay in speaker view mode, although my preference is to have everybody on there, but we have so many people tonight that it's taking two screens to see everybody, which is great. We're asking that you, unless you're a speaker or a panelist, to keep your webcam off. That is for crowd management for us, so we can figure out who the speakers are as we manage this. We have this in meeting mode rather than seminar mode. It's easier to manage in seminar mode, but we like the feeling that we've got everybody in here, so we're staying in meeting mode here. Please keep your microphone muted if you're not speaking. We actually don't need to hear your cat or you argue with your roommate. And a note, this meeting is being recorded, so recognize that it will be up for public viewing, which is a good thing, but if you don't want to be seen, keep your camera off. Let's roll forward. Special thanks to our sponsors, Cal State Monterey Bay and Startup Monterey Bay, that is us, and our marketing partner, the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. Thanks and roll. This is Startup Monterey Bay Connect. We're here to network, to meet and greet, see each other, meet new people, share and learn, find out what's happening, and build that community that it takes to get companies started. And above all, as Brooks likes to say, have fun, make money, and change the world. On to the next. There we go. This is our Startup Monterey Bay Connect team. I am Brad Barbeau. We have with us Mary Jo Zank, who you'll see in a little bit as she does the monthly Stump the Chump quiz. Dan Ripke, a new intern, student intern working with us, Aliyah Ibarra, and Sitam Etar, who had another student intern, has been working with us for a while on organizing Connect. Lynette Lathrop, who's driving tonight. She's running the slides. Dr. Jenny Kwan, who I don't think is on. I didn't see her on so far. And another new student intern, Mary Ann D'Souza. You want to join the team and help us out? We'd be glad to have you jump in. So poll just came up. We like to know where everybody's from. So tell us where you're from. Cool. We'll leave that up for a moment. Let's roll to the next slide. Tonight, we have an amazing panel to talk about the future of entrepreneurship. And we'll introduce the panel in a few minutes, but we got to do some of those dreaded announcements. And of course, we have to stump you with our monthly quiz. Panelists tonight, we've got 7 panelists joining us. We'll hear from each of them as we go, and then we'll get a good discussion going. Nice variety of folks, I have to say. We're really excited. On next. Introductions. If we have everybody introduce ourselves, we'll be here till 10 o'clock just with introductions. So put your introduction in chat. Say hello, who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? This is your chance to do a quick ad for your business. So you can put that in chat and peruse the chat as we go. Got some people jumping in there, calling in from Capitola, Fred Cohen from Angel to Exit, Ryan Micheletti from Founder Institute, another one of our panel members, etc. We've got 56 of the 65 of you in the poll. If you haven't been in the poll, you got a couple more seconds because it's just about time for the quiz. So 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom. Here's the results. 27 people from Monterey County, 13 people from Santa Cruz County, 1 from San Benito County. Let's hear rousing yay San Benito County from our 1 representative from San Benito. Are you out there? Cool. And there we go. All right. And we got 15 people from somewhere else. That's a great place, somewhere else. There are many times I want to be from somewhere else. Okay. It is time for the quiz. MJ, you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Okay, so I'm so excited. We have so many people participating. And for those who have not attended before, every month I try to find some little news clips about what's been happening in the entrepreneurial world in this region and see if people are following the news. So let's look at the first question. So if you've been following our newsletter, you would see this. What's the name of the Silicon Valley veteran and long-term IIED mentor that was recently interviewed and featured in an article on startupmontereybay.com? And the options are Brooks McChesney, Sean Camus, or Fred Cohen. So let's see how many people get it. How many people are going to answer? Ooh, ties. Getting close. Okay, I'm going to give you 5 more seconds. All right, let's end the poll. It looks like 18 chose Brooks, 9 chose Sham, and 17 chose Fred. So let's see. The answer is Brooks McChesney. Anyway, it's a great article, and if you get a chance to read it, you can. He has a lot of tidbits and gems to share. Next question. Okay, which regional startup company celebrated its listing on the New York Stock Exchange on August 11th? Looker, Joby Aviation, or Pahl Flight Technologies? Slowing down. Anybody else want to guess?
They don't guess. They know.
They don't guess? Okay. All right, let's call it. And the majority are voting for Joby Aviation. And the answer is Joby Aviation. Wow, 242 so far. Okay. Now this one, the next question is was an article that was in MC Weekly recently about a new local Mexican restaurant in Pacific Grove that just opened up this summer when so many local restaurants were forced to close their doors forever. So if you've been looking around Pacific Grove, there's 3 restaurants: Peppers Mexicali, La Bahia Mexican American restaurant, and Aquino's Birria. So let's see if people remember anything. Remember reading this article. Okay, it seems to be slowing down. All right, let's call it. And the majority is saying it's Aquinos. All right, and the answer is Aquinos. Wow, 3 for 3. This is really cool. This hasn't been done in a while. You've all stumped me tonight. What was really cool about Aquinos is also that Gustavo is working with his parents to create this, and he recently graduated from CSUMB. So we are so excited to support a local business that is started by CSUMB grad. Well, that's all for tonight. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much, Mary Jo. And so if you want to win the quiz, you need to be in the know. So check out startupmontereybay.com for our newsfeed and santacruzworks.org. They've got a fabulous newsfeed also. And I saw Doug in the audience tonight. So Santa Cruz Works is with us. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I think that they're going to put, the addresses for Startup Monterey Bay and Santa Cruz Works into chat. Okay, next slide. Reminder about the Launchpad. If you've got a startup company and you're looking for some help with that, join us in the Startup Launchpad. And Doug, are you there? I see you.
Yeah.
You want to do a 15-second on the accelerator, the Santa Cruz Works accelerator?
Oh, well, it's very secret, so I don't know how much we can say. We're making an announcement Thursday morning about the launch and the launch party. So you'll find it all in our newsletter.
Okay, we'll look for that newsletter. So read the Santa Cruz Works newsletter. Big news coming out on Thursday. All right, cool. Get virtual. If you know a small business that it needs some help getting online, getting a website set up, getting their social media working, or any other part of creating a virtual presence, Get Virtual is there to help them. This is a student-managed organization, started at UCSC, and CSUMB is a chapter. We were the next chapter after UCSC. This is a great and free service for small businesses. So they should go to our website. There's a link there to Get Virtual and find out about that program. On to what's next? Upcoming events. What do we got happening? The Startup Investment and Community Capital Expo, which tonight is a preview event for the Startup Investment and Community Capital Expo. The main event will be September 23rd. That's just about a week from Thursday, so coming up pretty quickly. It will be online. We wanted to be in person this year, but Delta got in our way. So it will be online from 8 in the morning until about 5 in the afternoon. You can go to siccmonterey.com to register. Tickets available now as we speak. And the 2021 DART Symposium is coming up in October 19th to 21st. And I think I saw Chris Bly out there. Chris, are you there?
Yes. Thanks,
go.
Brad. Yep, just going to give everybody a little heads up on the DART Symposium. As Brad said, October 19th to the 21st. It's going to be a hybrid event this year with morning presentations and panels. And then the afternoon event is going to be in person at 3 locations. And so the first location on the 19th is the Naval Postgraduate School's Slammer facility in Monterey. The second day is at the UCMBS facility in Marina. And then the final day on October 21st is at the Monterey Bay Academy in La Selva Beach. And so that's where I'm situated. And so it's going to be a really exciting event with this hybrid panel. Panels in the morning and then in person in the afternoon. So go to montereybaydart.org and get registered. So hope you can make it.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. I would note that the facilities that we're visiting in the afternoon are typically not open to the public. So if you want to see the Slammer facility, this is your opportunity. And same with Monterey Bay Academy for airspace integration, not generally open to the public. So it's a great opportunity to see those facilities. So thank you very much, Chris. And let's roll forward. So we're going to move into our presentations now. Reminder about chat. If you've got questions, don't try to hold them in your head. You'll give yourself a headache. Get those questions out of your head and into chat, and we'll track them. We'll probably hold the questions until we get to the end, but let's get them all queued up so we're ready to go when we get to the discussion part. Okay, on to what's next. And now it's time for our distinguished panel. A couple things to tee this up. Next slide. Let me say a little bit about this panel is the future of entrepreneurship. And next slide. I'll go through these quickly. So some of the questions that we might be thinking about in this panel are who are going to be the entrepreneurs of the future? And are they going to look like the entrepreneurs of the past? I don't think so. We want to know where the rich markets are going to be and where the technologies are going to be that are going to drive growth. What are the social issues that are going to affect entrepreneurship and startups going forward? And as we all learned in the past 2 years, what's going to come out of nowhere unexpectedly and change the world for us as we as entrepreneurs are working on changing the world. So let's roll forward. This is our opportunity to be scanning for opportunities, preparing for challenges, and looking for resources because, next slide, as Louis Pasteur said, chance favors the prepared mind. In fact, his exact quote is chance only favors the prepared mind. So this is our chance to prepare our minds. So let's roll forward and meet our panel. The way we're going to do this is we're going to give each panelist 5 minutes to do their introduction, to frame the issues as they see them. And then when we've gotten through all the panelists, we'll come back and pick up your questions and get a discussion going among the panelists. And now it's time for our panelists, and we are going to start this off with Nick Sramek. Nick is the co-founder and managing director of Doon Insights, a Bay Area-based company designed to create a community of startups, investors, and strategic partners. Wow, sounds a lot like us. We're all working toward the same thing, building that community. Through regular workshops and key innovation verticals, Doon Insights highlights cutting-edge startups and connects them to its community for investment and partnership. Let's welcome Nick Sramek and hear what he's got to say about the future of entrepreneurship.
Thanks a lot, Brad, and thank you for the introduction to my company. It saves me the time from doing it myself. But just to add on to that, we're always looking for more startups. So if you have an interesting idea and are looking to raise capital or connect with corporate innovation partners, please let me know, and I can drop my LinkedIn into the chat box after this. 5 minutes, I'm going to make that a fast 5, so more like 4. I'm going to start with 4 things that really got stuck in my mind when I thought about this topic, and those are the continued lowering of the cost of creation. That's the number 1. Number 2, the varying sources of financing that I'm seeing coming out of Silicon Valley and elsewhere. Number 3 is the rise of innovation hubs around the world that are not looking like Silicon Valley. And number 4 is the rise of what I call innovation corridors. So quickly going through those 4. First would be the lowering of the cost of creation. And how I see this is sort of the next evolution of what we've been seeing coming out of Silicon Valley for quite some time. So with the rise of cloud and all these other services that startups have, the need for raising large rounds so you can invest in the infrastructure of your company is behind us. And we're only seeing that exacerbated in this next stage. So one thing that COVID has taught us is that things that may have once taken 10 to 20 years to evolve in businesses have now happened in 1 to 2. And we've really pushed ourselves to innovate and think differently. That's definitely sort of a continuation of this theme that I'm seeing. And we're seeing that in quite a few different verticals. And one that I'd point to is within crypto startups. So crypto startups that I've been speaking to, they're rarely in one place. They're usually have team members all around the world. They don't look like people that live in Silicon Valley, because they're not usually people that live in Silicon Valley, and they don't act like that as well. They don't necessarily need the trappings of traditional startups, and they're using that to their benefit. Another part of that I'm seeing is that traction looks very differently today than it did before. And I see this as part of the cost of creation going down as well. So traction used to mean that you have great customer acquisition strategies, and then you raise a bunch of money and you put ads on Google and on Facebook and you get more customers in the door. Well, I think those days are now behind us as investors are looking for more than that from their money, and startups are able to do so. They're able to focus on building better product without necessarily proving customers right out the gate. So the ability to do more with less is something that I'm really seeing out of COVID, and definitely will be seeing afterwards. The second point was the sources of financing. So we all know about the SPACs in the room, and the SPACs are probably something that is more of a fad than anything, in my personal opinion. I think there's a few verticals where SPACs make a whole lot of sense, and we're going to hear more about that during the symposium itself, I'm sure. But besides SPACs, what we're seeing is this new entrance into the financing of early stage startups than I've ever seen before. So the rise of venture capital around the world is something that's really come to the front. But more than that, corporate venture capital is through the roof, and that's only going to continue. And then both VCs, CVCs, and other investors, they're getting more comfortable with investing sight unseen. So the VCs traditionally would only invest in companies that they could, walk out their door in Sand Hill Road and speak to them down the street. Well, that's no longer the case, and more investors are becoming comfortable with the idea that they can talk to a company a couple times and then give them their first check, or maybe meet with them once for coffee, but then give them that first check. So the ability to do that has really grown quite a bit. So other than that, the VCs, the CVCs are changing the way they do things, but also international money coming in, both from large institutional investors like sovereign wealth funds, endowments, foundations, and pension funds from in the US and around the world. We're seeing a lot more money coming to the space, and I think that's really going to continue, especially in the US, as our pension funds and other institutional investors realize that they're missing out by not investing in their own innovation ecosystems. On to number 3, the rise of innovation hubs around the world. So this is something that we've seen for quite some time in COVID, and a post-COVID world is only going to continue doing that. So with this change in how we finance startups and this lowering of the cost of creation, we don't need to be in Silicon Valley. We don't need to be really in any single hub. So what we're going to see is more and more micro hubs around the world that are more specialized, that are more reflective of local problems and developing local solutions for those problems. Instead of Silicon Valley building Silicon Valley solutions for Silicon Valley problems, I think we're going to see much more of a localization of startups and localization of solutions coming out of this as well. And the last part I put out there is the rise of innovation corridors. And what I call this is sort of this growing connection to the rural, suburban, and urban centers. So you can see it as sort of the stretching out of our urban communities into new areas that are wider, and they're more connected between the sources of our things, meaning the sources of our food, the sources of our innovation, the sources of our our manufacturing to sort of these urban centers. And sort of this lengthening out is going to require infrastructure investment on behalf of communities, but also coordination between public and private sectors as we look to develop a transportation infrastructure, broadband infrastructure that will connect these communities and eventually lead to more innovation coming out of out of areas that are not just within 50 miles of our major hubs like Silicon Valley. So those are 4 quick things that I see on my mind, and I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nick. If you all have questions, reminder, put those in chat. And I believe next up we have, trying to find, there we go. We have Pedro David Espinoza. I believe he is on. Pedro is a TED speaker, internet entrepreneur, tech investor, board member, and award-winning author. He's done a lot. At the age of 19, Pedro became the founder and CEO of SmileyGo, a platform that helps companies invest smarter. His first startup was part of the 2017 cohort of the Berkeley Skydeck. In 2017, Janet Napolitano, president of the University of California, awarded Pedro the University of California Entrepreneur Winner for Berkeley. In 2018, he founded Alpaca Pan Peru, a venture that empowers underestimated women to become entrepreneurs. Pedro is now the vice president of business development of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. He oversees the 100 Startups Initiative to support female founders and entrepreneurs of color through funding, resources, and corporate partnerships. Pedro, thank you very much for coming in all the way from Florida. The podium is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brad. Yeah, I am usually based in Sunnyvale, California, in Silicon Valley, but unfortunately, my parents' health is not doing well, so I'll be in Florida for at least a month. But thank you so much for having me. I think the future of entrepreneurship is super exciting. I think the rise of corporate venture, a very specific vertical, which I'm super passionate about, is open source. The commercial open source software is super cool, and it keeps growing with like MongoDB and so many other startups and unicorns. I think in 2010, we saw software as a service, SaaS. I think now from 2020 beyond, we're seeing costs like commercial open source software. Then another vertical in the venture capital and startup world that I really like is the one that has to do with blockchain. Everything that's decentralized, it's super, super exciting, especially in the healthcare industry. I think for those of you that know, Epic has like the monopoly of all the hospitals and private practices and clinics in the US and North America, but you can totally build a unicorn, a decacorn, by being like an add-on or a plug-in to Epic. And that's a huge space. At SVLG, at the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, we work with a lot of startups from seed to decacorn, Series C, E, D, and many times we see this innovation. We also work with a lot of venture capitalists like HSBC Ventures. We work with Sousa Ventures as well, Alsop and Louis with Ernest and Fu, and we're basically just the platform that connects, that we offer networking opportunities for entrepreneurs to meet with law firms, to meet with venture capitalists, angel investors, and this is the ecosystem that we call the launch circuit. So we're a membership-based nonprofit, and yeah, we're like Nick and other organizations here, we're here to support founders, entrepreneurs, especially in California. And I've been to Monterey several times. I love the atmosphere. I love the positivity. I love the culture, the aquarium, the energy. And please let me know how I can be a resource. Once again, we're based here in the Silicon Valley, and we're working with a lot of first-time founders. We're very intentional when it comes to first-generation founders, immigrants, people of color, veterans, women, and other groups. The other priority and the other thing that I'm super passionate about is equity and inclusion. And at SVLG with Ahmad, who's our CEO, we're very committed to supporting the next generation of Black and Brown entrepreneurs. So earlier this year, we launched the 25 by 25. It's a pledge that by 2025, at least 1/4 of your leadership team will be women and people of color. And yeah, I wrote a book on inclusion and innovation, and super, super happy to be here. Once again, Brad, thank you so much for having me. It means a lot.
Excellent. Thank you, Pedro. Really appreciate you coming in and hope that all goes as well as it can at home for you. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Ryan Micheletti. Ryan is head of global operations for the Founder Institute, the world's largest pre-seed startup accelerator. Since 2009, Founder Institute has launched over 5,000 startups across 200 cities with a global mentor network of over 20,000 members. Ryan works with startup leaders in over 90 countries to help develop their innovation ecosystems and launch tech companies in their regions. So Ryan, welcome. And what have you got to share with us?
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you to Brad and the Startup Monterey Bay team. These previous speakers brought up some great points. I'd also like to add, I'm also a recent immigrant from Silicon Valley over to the Santa Cruz County. My family and I live in Boulder Creek, and I can say it's one of the better life decisions we've made. And that goes to one of the points that I'll dive into here in a moment, that I think, there's going to be a decentralization of startup resources and networks. So there's really three main points that I want to drive home. The first is decentralization, the second is impact, and the third is around creating network effects. And so as some of the other speakers have already mentioned, more billion-dollar companies are being created in regions outside of Silicon Valley than ever before. And this trend of distributed entrepreneurship started pre-COVID, but it was a little slow. I think in like 2015 or 2016, still half of the unicorns of the world were from Silicon Valley. And so the pandemic, however, has increased the speed and acceleration of that trend. And so now there's a lot more decentralization of access to startup resources. And it's also connecting startup ecosystems like never before, similar to the corridor concept that Nick had mentioned. And so two of the main pillars for any startup ecosystem really come down to access to talent and access to funding. And so historically, this was restricted to these geographical areas. And so, for example, you would have to move to Silicon Valley to build $1 billion company, because that's where you could hire 300 other people that could potentially show up to the office every day. Additionally, it was a lot easier to raise money from investors that were in areas that had high density of investors, places like Silicon Valley or these major hubs. And now in the post-pandemic world, this is changing very rapidly. And I'm seeing this at the global level as well. So as founders, that you now have access to a global startup ecosystem of talent, but also investment. And you can now live anywhere and build large, successful companies. And we're just at the infancy of this trend. And I think this is going to continue. And so this is one of the reasons why we launched Founder Institute Santa Cruz to serve the Monterey Bay region. People are like myself are going to seek better lifestyles, which Monterey Bay provides. And so having remote access to people, networks, capital, those things are going to be vastly important for anyone that's looking to build a global startup. So on the funding side, investors are also becoming more open to investing in companies that are outside of their geographical region, or maybe they didn't meet before. Traditionally, the earlier you were in your company's life cycle, the closer the investors would want to be to you. And that's hard because if you live out in the middle of Missouri, maybe you don't have access to the same networks and access to capital like people here in the Bay Area do. And so in early 2019 at Founder Institute, we saw that there was a major issue where capital was centralized in these major startup hubs around the world. And so this created a funding crunch where many talented founders working on meaningful problems and solutions couldn't access the capital that they needed. And so we launched a program called VC Lab. This is a venture capital firm accelerator program, and our goal is to launch 1,000 new venture capital firms all across the world where we operate the Founder Institute, and by 2025. And so to date, we've launched almost 200 new venture capital firms in ecosystems ranging from Lagos, Nigeria to Sao Paulo, Brazil. And so you're going to see this decentralization trend continue. The second trend I want to talk about is impact. And so if you look at impact investing, it's grown 10x over the last 5 years. And so additionally, as millennials become older and become more of the investor class, 90% of millennials believe that they want to invest in sustainable companies and startups. And so at the end of 2018, we launched an initiative called Global Startup Alignment. And the concept of this was that we wanted to enable companies to build technologies that could positively impact humanity. And we wanted to create new venture funds that would fund those companies and then connect them to a network of resources like investors, customers, mentors, et cetera, who could fund and grow those companies. And so we coined this term for progress. If you go to fi.co/progress, you'll see that we started integrating this concept of impact based upon the UN SDGs into our curriculum and into even our applications into the program. And so we coined this term called Impact Key Performance Indicators, or IKPIs. And so the idea is that every startup should be thinking about their impact from its inception, and that we believe that founders who can measure that impact, they'll not only be able to build a stronger business, but they'll also be able to attract more interest from investors. And so the last trend I'll quickly touch on is the network effects. And so we're in the middle of this network revolution, and startups are leveraging the power of network effects like never before. And every startup, if you think about it, is just a network or a collection of people, documents, and resources. And so when you as a founder or you as a team of founders or as a startup combine your network with other networks, people in the ecosystem, it's going to create a multiplier effect that will open up immense opportunities. And now when you pair that with the fact that these networks are also decentralized, you could work with a network in Silicon Valley or in Toronto or in Lagos, Nigeria. And so it's a really interesting concept that you have this decentralized network that you can tap into. And as we've all seen during the pandemic, there's a lot of noise out there. And so in order to stand out in the market as a startup, it's important you get in front of the right people and you open up access to the right opportunities. So that's where it becomes really critical to build that network, which will allow you to tap into those opportunities, both locally, but also globally. And so by joining networks like Startup Monterey Bay, Santa Cruz Works, or Founder Institute Santa Cruz, you're able to expedite your success by being able to find the right people and opportunities faster. And so, as I mentioned, there's the quick call to action. By 2025, Founder Institute's goal is to launch 10,000 startups across the world and 1,000 venture capital firms that will help fund those startups across 200 ecosystems. And so we're looking for talented founders, mentors, and partners that want to join us on that journey to build the global startup ecosystem. And we also have applications open for Founder Institute Santa Cruz, which is going to start here in the next month or two. So I look forward to hearing from what your questions are and hearing from the other panelists.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ryan, and the Founder Institute. So if you check out chat, there's addresses there to check out what's going on at Founder Institute. Really cool. Next up, we have Alfredo Mathew. Alfredo Mathew III brings over 20 years of experience as a teacher leader in New York City and California public schools, as well as Western Regional Director of a National Youth Entrepreneurship Organization, NFTE. Alfredo co-founded and is a partner at ESO Ventures Incorporated, an entrepreneurial support organization focused on providing the confidence, competence, and capital for any Black and brown person to become an entrepreneur. ESO's big goal is to establish a business every day, a business a day for the next 10 years and create over $3 billion in revenue and 60,000 new jobs in underinvested communities. So I think Alfredo is going to have some really cool stuff to say here. What you got for us, Alfredo?
Thanks for having me, Brad. And this has been very interesting, listening to everyone share their perceptions of the future of entrepreneurship. And I think as I approach this, I want to make sure that you can hear me. As I approach this, I think the future of entrepreneurship is small, is diverse, and is circular. And I think of those three characteristics, which are really values, because I'm thinking about how we got here and where we're going. One thing that I think has really impacted the country, obviously, with COVID-19 is the inequalities that we have in this nation have been pretty laid bare. And we've seen that, half the country doesn't have any savings, doesn't have a safety net, while, the top 10th, the top 1% are really, doing incredibly well in this economy. And so those inequalities are causing a lot of disruption. Another thing that's happening is we have a dislocated workforce. Businesses can't find enough employees. The service jobs that exist are not enticing enough, which I think is ultimately going to drive people to entrepreneurship, to starting their own enterprises. We also have a talent pipeline. My background is education. I've worked in schools on career pathways for a long time. And one frustration that I really had was that the schools are really not aligned to the innovation economy. If you're a public school student in the state of California, it's very difficult to land that job at PayPal or at Salesforce or in the startup community, because startups are sourcing talent from the global economy, not necessarily from San Jose or from Oakland or from San Francisco. And so I think all of that is presenting a once in a generation opportunity to build more equitable entrepreneurial ecosystems. And also say that because we've also seen a tremendous government response to COVID and to the pandemic, and we're going to see incredible public investments in ecosystems. We're going to see from the bottom up and the middle out. And this is going to create incredible opportunities to grow entrepreneurs, to remove barriers, and to reimagine access to capital, which really has to happen if we're going to empower communities to solve their own problems. One thing that we're focused on at ESO Ventures is confidence, competence, and capital. The confidence and the competence, that really comes through a cohort-based approach. What I hear from everyone here is that everyone needs community, everyone needs access to networks, everyone needs kind of just-in-time education and supports. But that third C, capital, is the one that is really elusive if you're not in that high-tech, high-growth ecosystem. So much focus is on this upper quadrant. We're focusing on the beginning quadrant, on helping folks who just have a concept understand what their opportunity is. And another difference, there's about 34 million entrepreneurs in the country. Most of them are sole proprietors. Most of them are not high-tech startups. And I think that if we're going to have a more equitable country, if we're going to have better communities, we need to find ways to support small business. And that comes with rethinking access to capital. Most right now, a lot of the sole proprietors that exist that have side hustles that are working cannot become employer enterprises because they don't have the business formation, they don't have the foundation, they can't access retail banking. A lot of the capital isn't in retail banks. That's not where the high return is. It's in the 10X venture capital realm. And I think that we need to invest more in small businesses and capitalizing small businesses. So what did we do during the pandemic? We launched an incubator in East Oakland called ESO Ventures. We started doing the work, and then we wrote legislation. And it's actually called Capital in the Community. And the Capital in the Community initiative is to provide that first investment to an entrepreneur. And this is an investment before an entrepreneur has a proven business model, before they have their cash flow. And it's not based on their credit score or their collateral. It's really based on what are they able to show during that 10-week incubator. How can we provide a merit-based loan? So we really need to rethink that access to capital, and we're one group among many who are thinking about how to basically do capital from the perspective of the entrepreneur, not from the banking institution. And so I'd be really interested and curious to hear about others, how they're approaching this access to capital. Because when someone says, hey, you don't even need traction, you just need a concept and you can get funded. That's not the experience for millions of Americans who have a concept, who have a dream, but don't know how to get it launched and started. So we have a pilot for what we're calling universal capital access. We have $8 million from the state of California, and we're connecting our loan fund to our business incubators, which we're designing with community colleges. That's the other thing that's unique. I think we have to We have to leverage the existing infrastructure. Of course, four-year colleges play a role in the ecosystem, but we need to engage community colleges. So that's a little bit about what I'm focused on building, and I'm really curious to hear others who are really thinking about not just the high-tech ecosystem, but how do we support entrepreneurship across the continuum.
Wow, that's really great, Alfredo. I really like the balancing emphasis on the small, on the beginning. The small entrepreneur is incredibly important to the ecosystem and can be very challenging to serve well. And it sounds like you guys are doing some really great job, great things with that. So excellent. Thank you very much, Alfredo. And next up, we have Mothusi Pahl. He's the Chief Commercial Officer at a private equity firm, B3, and he is also an entrepreneur in residence at the University of California at Santa Cruz, UCSC, and president of UAV Recon, a Texas-based software and services company focused on inspection of electrical infrastructure. So you'll notice there's a pattern here. All these people are doing like 6 major things at a time. We're all entrepreneurs, we're all nuts. The co-founder of several startups in demand-side management, hybrid power systems, and data contextualization, Mothusi specializes in the commercialization of new technology in heavy industry, including energy, power generation, utilities, infrastructure, and mining. These are really important to our economy. Thank you, Mothusi. Mothusi, glad to have you with us.
Good evening, everybody. And Brad, thank you for the introduction. The topic of issues facing entrepreneurs for me was, I mean, for anybody who's gone through that slog, you know, it's not easy, and we are by nature an optimistic bunch. But the topic for me was really the issues. So I am bullish, and I don't want my comments to be taken the wrong way. And I agree with all of the comments on the panel thus far. But the issues that I see up ahead, one is the broader economic divide within our community, within our society, within our country, and the geographic divide. These are very real factors, and they certainly impact the universe of entrepreneurship. I think these gaps are going to grow even more acute over time. I think they're going to get worse before they get better. And as a founder with enterprise clients in the Great Plains, in the South, in the Appalachia region of the US, ironically, I actually don't have any clients in California. They're everywhere else. So, you know, I see and I live this divide, and I think that these divides together lead to, in many ways, like a cultural incomprehension. And when I say cultural incomprehension, all the people I work with are in Texas, but the people I live with and interact with in terms of families and neighbors are all in California. And when folks in California hear what's happening politically in Texas, they just scratch their head and like, you know, how on earth could that possibly be real? And that's cultural incomprehension. The same way folks in Texas look back at California and like, how on earth could you pass a law like that? That's cultural incomprehension. So how does it manifest? I think the number one issue is what Alfredo was talking about. It's access to resources. You know, I think Ryan and Nick, you know, are talking about, you know, creating spaces so that people can get access to resources. But in my experience, the capital is out there, but capital is like water. It follows the path of least resistance. And that means capital goes for low risk bets. And anybody who is a non-traditional venture backable founder will tell you that the vast majority of money goes to repeat founders in known ecosystems. And that's just a fact. And it doesn't mean that that's not, changing, and the rate of change in, diversity, equity, and in kind of social entrepreneurship. I mean, the rate of change there is huge, but that's because it's starting from such a small number. It's like, when we talk about, everybody likes to pat themselves on the back and say, wow, look at growth rate in solar PV and wind versus all these other power facilities and hydrocarbon-based power facilities, they're closing down. Well, all of that's true, but the aggregate numbers in total tell a very different story. It's, we're at an inflection point where things are changing, and they're changing quickly, but we're behind, and it's it's going to take a long time to get over the hurdle. So I'm not trying to diminish any of the work that any of the other panelists are doing, because it is high quality, it's critically important, it's essential, and I think there's a lot of both money to be made there and a lot of benefit for the community to realize. But it's not like we're here now. It's not like it's now and that money is widely available to anybody who needs it, and that there's an equal opportunity for a brick and mortar founder, like Alfredo's talking about, in contrast to, somebody who's writing code and straight out of Stanford. There, it comes back to money, most likely going to repeat entrepreneurs in known ecosystem. So, I think Nick's comments about localization, very real. But I think the interesting piece there, and it says a lot about the group of panelists here this evening, is that it doesn't happen organically. It happens when people like Doug, who's on the call, and Chris, who's on the call, and Nick, like freaking and pick up the yoke. And especially, when the UCSEs and the CSUMBs of the universe intentionally carve out budgets to seed regional startup ecosystems. It happens, but it happens when somebody's like, okay, you know what? It's not going to happen unless I make a move, and I'm going to have to step up, put my chips on the table, and I'm going to get beat down, but it's a good fight, and I'm going to fight for it. So my issues I see facing entrepreneurs, it's economic divide, it's geographic divide, it's cultural incomprehension, and it's access to resources.
Cool. Thank you very much, Mothusi. That was great. And our next contestant, our next panelist is Trevor Parham. Trevor Parham was with us last year for the Startup Investment and Community Capital Expo. He is an artist, entrepreneur, and investor, truly a man after my own heart. Founder and CEO of Oakstop, which is a Black-owned and operated business that uses commercial real estate as a platform for community empowerment by providing workspace, meeting event space, and creative space for entrepreneurs and communities of color. As part of his work with Oakstop, Trevor co-founded the Oakland Black Business Fund, an investment platform focused on empowering Black businesses with capital, technical assistance, and growth strategy. The platform includes a $10 million grant-making initiative and a $1 billion nationwide investment fund. Trevor, thank you for joining us tonight. What you have for us?
Thank you, Brad. It's been great to hear these perspectives from everyone tonight. And, I think that a lot of what I would have to say does indeed sort of build off of some of the most recent comments. And, Alfredo is here in Oakland and works in Oakland. And, not surprisingly, a lot of my perspective, I would say, is similar. I do feel that the pandemic has exposed a lot of the market failures that were already in existence, well before the pandemic. And so a lot of what I think we'll be seeing in the future now is how the face of entrepreneurship is changing in light of these market failures. So, one of those that I think everyone has been aware of is, the failure of the labor markets, right? And we're seeing that more now in the pandemic, where people were not working for so long, and in doing so, realizing that these jobs that they were in were simply not working for them. But that was something that was going on well before the pandemic. You just had less of an opportunity for people to walk away from those jobs and to explore, sort of other opportunities or other options. And so what you get when those labor markets fail is you get a lot of people, particularly communities of color, that turn to entrepreneurship not as necessarily an aspirational opportunity for a next career, but really they do so as a survival strategy. And the reason that has been an issue in the past is that survival strategy hasn't had coupled with it the capital and other resources there to allow somebody who's maybe left a large corporation where they had a very sort of basic service job to now start a brick and mortar business that's going to actually be able to be sustainable. And so in light of the capital market failures, I think that what we're also now seeing is that there are other organizations and other groups that typically come from these same communities that are subject to these market failures that are standing up other capital opportunities, because they're realizing now that in order to keep their own communities intact, they need to find ways to essentially not only create their own models for capital distribution, but also start to step away from and sort of minimize the dependency on a lot of other sort of mainstream financial institutions and mainstream investment sources. And so with that, what you end up with is in a lot of ways, sort of a flattening of the face of entrepreneurship. And we're going to end up with not necessarily the model where everybody is chasing the unicorn dream, but more so we're going to end up with a model where the ratio of entrepreneurs to not is going to change significantly. More and more people entering entrepreneurship, and at the same time, communities who are very much connected to those market failures are going to be developing more and more support systems and resources and ecosystems for those entrepreneurs as well, to allow those people to be able to not only to sustain, but also to have a viable path if they're not on the high growth trajectory. And I think that that's the thing that has historically sort of divided up the face of entrepreneurship, is whether you're high growth or a lifestyle business. But I think now as we're approaching this new era, perhaps it won't even be polarized in that same way anymore. It'll just more so be looked at the idea that there's more resources and supports, therefore those entrepreneurs have more validity in their paths. Another thing that we're already seeing a lot of is you're seeing entrepreneurs of color creating products, whether they're tech companies or not, creating products that are geared at a lot of these entrepreneurs who are now really pushing the limits and understanding of what entrepreneurship is. And an example of that is the creator economy. You've got a lot of young kids who are culturally inclined, creating lots and lots of money through everything from TikTok to YouTube videos, what have you. And then you've even got the advent now of NFTs, but you're going to see entrepreneurs entering the space to serve those entrepreneurs who are creating those things. And that's a huge market that I think in some ways is, I wouldn't say coming out of nowhere, but it's something that we'll see a lot of unprecedented opportunities for entrepreneurs who understand those culturally inclined entrepreneurs and are able to create solutions for them. So in a lot of ways, that then is going to have a ripple effect on more and more people who are in junior high school, maybe they're not in the best school systems that are supporting them to be, going on to the next PayPal or what have you, but they're going to see that there's pathways that exist for them simply by using their own cultural competence, as well as these other tools that are being created just for them to be able to sort of grow that business and model that they have. So in a lot of ways, I think we're going to see that entrepreneurship is going to spread, but then also that the amount of capital required to grow a business is also going to continue to drop, because there's going to be more competition for entrepreneurs that are entering the market with solutions that don't require such a hefty amount of capital. To shift gears, I think another thing that we're going to see, and I'm certainly seeing this through my work with Oakstop, but we're already seeing a major shift within the commercial real estate markets, which of course are the home of the HQs for a lot of these venture-backed companies. What I think that's going to create is it's going to create a shift away from large commercial office footprints, where you have companies that are occupying upwards of 10,000 square feet for their startup, and instead a lot of those companies are going to shift towards smaller real estate footprints, whether they're in a co-working space or if they're just getting a smaller office space overall, or completely sort of decentralizing their workforce. And then what that's going to mean is that there's more opportunities within the market for other entrepreneurs to take advantage of commercial real estate, whether it's that the prices are dropping, or commercial landlords and commercial developers are going to start innovating themselves on other solutions that bring price points down to a level that are more accessible for this broader population of entrepreneurs. And what that can create then is it can create greater entrepreneurship ecosystems within our central business districts and within our urban core, because now they can actually house people who represent that greater majority of entrepreneurs in the country and are possibly creating products and services that are more relevant to their direct communities. So instead of having several different technology companies that are on the upper floors of a skyscraper serving the rest of the world, you're going to have lots of entrepreneurs that are in buildings that are on the first, second, and third floors of these buildings that are serving their direct communities. And those communities patronizing those entrepreneurs are then again going to become inspired to see how they can enter that economy that is built upon our market failures that we've seen in the past, but then, as I said before, have definitely been exacerbated with the pandemic.
Very cool, Trevor. Really interesting viewpoint. And Alfredo's been carrying on quite a conversation, kind of playing off of what you've been saying. I want to come back to that after we get in our final speaker, Angie Mertens. Angie's been spearheading One World Training as the program director since 2015, where she's convening and educating social entrepreneurs, investors, and corporates in the Bay Area. She's curated and produced 50 plus social impact events and enterprise showcases in collaboration with organizations such as the Social Venture Circle, Tonic, NIA Impact Capital, Spiro Ventures, East Bay Community Foundation, and others. Since 2019, she's been part of Slow Money NorCal, part of the leadership team for them. Slow Money is a movement and a national nonprofit organization that catalyzes investments in local food systems. Before joining the Bay Area's social impact field, Angie worked in the private sector with Tesla Motors, where she was a key member of the sales and marketing team. Welcome back, Angie. Angie was also with us last year for the Startup Investment and Community Capital Expo. Glad to have you back again, Angie.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for having me. And I'm very happy to see Alfredo and Trevor here, because with our work in Silicon Valley, I feel like we're building a big bridge to Oakland and, talking about access to capital. So can't wait to dive more into this. So let me start by kind of very high level. So I believe as we enter the new chapter of history, or we're entering a new chapter of history where the socioeconomic impacts of COVID-19 are anticipated to linger for years to come. So I believe social enterprises have the exceptional opportunity to repair and to rebuild a more just, equitable systems and provide lots of new solutions that we don't have. I also believe that the world is entering an exciting kind of new age of entrepreneurship. Like through my work in the Valley and the greater Bay Area, I've seen many more women entrepreneurs, really showing up and being there on the table, creating a table for them, as well as a lot of diverse entrepreneurs as well. What I wanted to point out, what was interesting to see over the last couple of years as well, is that there's way more entrepreneurs from different age groups as well. So not only college entrepreneurs, but also all the way up to retirees. So all across the field, I feel like people are really stepping up and saying, we need to build solutions and we don't have time. So let's build it and let's use social entrepreneurship as a tool for that. So let me go more into the practical phase. I think there's really 3 issues when I think about the next several years for entrepreneurs. One, on a macro level, it's really the impact of climate change. We know the climate change space is really exploding. I've seen it over the last couple of years, like in terms of entrepreneurs, but also the impact that climate change has on basically startups. So I see a lot of startups not only creating vitamin Bs, as it is often said, it kind of like in the impacts in the entrepreneur space, but only painkillers. So basically, there's companies out there that are really needed so that we can all continue to live here on this planet and that are serving people. And then also, I see a lot of times entrepreneurs all across the different verticals, not necessarily in the climate space, really thinking through how do we need to prepare, what do we need to do to really fight climate change and make sure this planet is habitable. So like the issue on a macro level, climate change is really impacting the space. The second part is mental health. Not only that space is booming, but through the work that we do at One World, we work a lot with entrepreneurs early stage. It is a really hard world that we're all living in. And in order for you as a CEO, and I know there's a lot of aspiring startups in the audience, as well as folks running companies already for a longer time, you as a startup CEO really need to be resilient in order to survive here and in order to kind of thrive. So what I've seen plenty of entrepreneurs in the mental space, or their startups being acquired. One of is Hello Core recently, they got acquired by Hyperis. I also just want to invite all the entrepreneurs that are running companies already or thinking about building companies, really create a mental health policy within your companies. I'll drop some links about that, because if you want to keep your company thriving, you need to make sure you're not only yourself, but also your employees are staying, healthy and have the energy to do it. I also noticed that there is an M Corp certification being built. So a lot of you know the B Corp space, but really a mental health certification to make sure companies are really a safe space. They care about their employees as a human being. And around this whole mental health issue, like we basically started last year something called the CEO Network, because a lot of not only our own portfolio companies from One World Fund, but also from entrepreneurs that have been presenting over the last couple of years, and they really asked for safe spaces where you're in a place with other CEOs to learn from each other, to talk about, the big visions, crazy ideas, all the way to, business challenges and what is really, happening for them personally and also in the entrepreneur space. So there's a lot of, also diverse founders in our groups that are really talking honest and authentic what is happening in the space. And we learn a lot. What's the role for us as ecosystem builders and kind of building the community? How can we support them? So big shout out, like kind of around this whole mental health space, to make sure we keep that on our mind. And then the last point I want to make is kind of on the funding level. So yes, access to capital is really, really crucial and important. I would also add here, that mixed funding models are going to be really important. So I would say let's encourage and support entrepreneurs to really think creatively about their capital resources, that they look into non-dilutive federal grants and, couple that with diverse set of impact-oriented investors and crowdfunding. So I see a lot of entrepreneurs like, oh, I only want to go the VC route and that's it. But let's really encourage everybody and support folks to think outside of that, very narrow one way to be supported financially. Let me put it this way. There's lots of other ways to kind of pull that in. So yeah, thanks for having me again, and really excited about the discussion that is about to happen.
Great, thanks, Angie. And given the name of your organization, One World, I note that you're saying that we may be one world, but there's not just one way in
Absolutely.
that one world. Yeah, very cool. So that is our group. I got everybody right. Make sure I didn't miss anybody. That was quite a group, quite a diverse set of views and takes. I am personally struck by the sort of continuing two worlds, if you will, the one of the scalable ventures, doing venture capital, and that whole game that I like to call the venture game. And then the other one, the maybe smaller businesses, the community-based businesses, the ones that to me are important to our quality of life. You know, the big ones may provide the bulk, ultimately the bulk of the employment, but those smaller businesses are the ones that we depend on for every day to eat at, to buy from, to interact with. They're really our quality of life. And they're very different models. And the one that feels like we struggle the most with is that smaller one. And I'm hearing some really, really cool approaches to innovative ways of making capital available to those businesses. Very, very cool. So looking for questions from the audience. If you've got questions you want to pose to our panel, we've got a few minutes here to talk through a little bit. I'm interested in, Alfredo, you had a piece that you put in while Trevor was speaking. Sort of, it sounds like you two are kindred spirits. I'd be interested in having you articulate out loud a little bit for us what you were speaking to in your chat.
Well, I'll just bring up one point, and I know Trevor and I were in a conversation a little under a year ago about access to capital, and it was about we need to rethink underwriting criteria, right? What is it? What do you need to prove in order to get access to capital? And someone in the chat suggested, you know, we have to have incredible due diligence before we invest, right? I mean, no private investor wants to, you know, invest money and not have that investment returned. But I think if we are going to do the hard work of addressing the chasm that we have in this country, we're going to have to make capital more accessible, and we're going to have to change. I'm new to lending. I've never been in lending before, but we're going to develop a lending product, and we're not relying on the banks or CDFIs. We're not taking their formula of credit score, collateral, and cash flow in order to determine who has access to the capital. We're basically going to make lines of credit of $5,000 to $32,000 available, and this is public dollars that we're being given to invest in our entrepreneurs. And we have to create a whole new underwriting criteria, and we're going to build it from scratch. And it's going to be based on merit. It's going to be based on what do the entrepreneurs, what do they demonstrate through their work, not through their history, but what potential do we see in them based on what they present to us. And we have to give them the capital. Like ultimately, we have to make more capital available, and that capital has to start flowing. And we have to think through the continuum of capital. So if an entrepreneur shows that they actually have promise, that they have an opportunity, how can they get that next capital? And it has to be transparent, and it, you know, so that's what we're working on.
Got it. Very exciting work. Other thoughts from the panel on this issue of certainly access to capital is critically important for all startups, and the models are quite different. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a thought on that.
Yep.
When we're looking at underwriting criteria, you know, especially if we're going to look at the sort of venture space, we also have to remember that oftentimes the underwriting criteria is there with the idea of trying to manage and mitigate risk. However, a lot of the venture firms are often investing in a lot of high risk deals, only because those high risk deals mirror certain patterns that they may have seen in the past, where this other business did really well here, so maybe this one will as well. But at the same time, a lot of those things fail at large amounts of investment. And so when you're looking at something like what Alfredo's talking about, with up to 32K of an investment, I mean, that's a small fraction of what a lot of other outfits are losing in entirety, even with doing the due diligence that they're doing. So I think that the argument can be made that you could still manage to risk investing in, some businesses that are smaller with a different underwriting approach, simply because you're not necessarily risking the idea of losing money in the millions, but you're maybe losing money in the, tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands. And so if you, just kind of did the math there and maybe did 10 to 20 of those investments versus one where you lose everything, you're also diversifying your opportunities there, and therefore also mitigating risk. But overall, I think that there's just a lot of bias when we look at what's risky. And there's also an understanding around who a lot of these investors are willing to support, even if they are high risk, and who they're not willing to support. And oftentimes the support and the sort of infrastructural resources that they'll provide to those entrepreneurs are also based on bias. And so we really need to re-examine not just the underwriting criteria, but also re-examine all the bias that informs the underwriting criteria, and think about what it looks like to both take risks, but also make greater efforts to see these entrepreneurs succeed, even if the investor doesn't fully have the life experience that would allow them to truly understand the potential for that entrepreneur.
Cool.
Brad, can I piggyback on that?
Sure, absolutely, Mothusi.
One of the issues there that we're trying to tackle over at UCSC is, in the really formative stages of a really early stage startup, you're even talking about like pre-angel investor money, and pre what the Valley VC community would talk about as angel investor, where a lot of it's friends and family money. Like, how do you get the space to work on your idea? And more often than not, a traditional angel investor is going to ask you, well, who else has contributed? Do you have family members who are supporting you? And what we find at the university, which I think is probably consistent with the rest of the footprint here that Monterey Bay Connect is addressing, is that over 45% of our student body comes from households where family members cannot legally invest because they're not qualified investors. So they legally, even if they had money that they wanted to pull out of their savings account and contribute to their daughter's startup, they legally can't do it because they don't meet the definition of a qualified investor. So, the challenges, I think, you in many ways are lucky, not as a non-traditional founder, but as a founder who does not fit the typical typical criteria of being venture backable, are really fortunate if you've gotten to the point where people are doing due diligence on you. Like how in the really fundamental kind of nascent spaces or kind of that nascent time window, I think one of the core issues that we've got to get to is how do we get founders to the point where they've got space to bring these ideas up, where they can the support in the ecosystem. I mean, the sizes of angel rounds these days, typical angel rounds in the Valley. I mean, I raised a $2 million angel round. I mean, I'm not saying that as bragging, but I mean, that's an angel round. A lot of people don't need $2 million. to Alfredo's point, I mean, maybe it's $30,000. So the whole idea, the whole model of criteria, the whole model of kind of defining the space and trying to force fit isn't going to solve, isn't going to cure what ails us. I'd be curious to hear from Ryan, especially looking into international markets like Lagos, where I imagine the check size probably means something different over there. I wonder if any of that kind of international experience, if that maps back over here and how you're thinking about helping smaller startups and founders get off the ground.
Sure, happy to dive in. Well, to give you an example, the size of your angel round is the size of an entire fund in Lagos, Nigeria. So, when you're comparing, Silicon Valley versus Lagos, obviously there's, there's a currency and sort of like cost of living component. But that said, we do see a lot of similar trends, right? In terms of like, you've got the friends and family, you've got the angel round, you then go into like seed or Series A. It's just at a much smaller dollar amount. And we are seeing more interest from US investors and even Canadian investors in places like Lagos, where they have like a pretty robust growing ecosystem that are continually churning out unicorns. And so, that framework does stay consistent between the ecosystems.
Interesting. Cool. One thing I noticed, so in the panel and in some of the others of us that are represented in the audience right now, startup entrepreneurs have got a lot of choice about who they go to for advisors. There are lots of different, and so I'm interested in what each of your views are about how do they go about deciding what incubator or accelerator or advisor group what should they be looking for in assessing who to work with, because they do have a choice.
Well, maybe I'll kind of kick it off here. I think like one particular important aspect is really looking what's the mission alignment. So, who am I as a CEO? What kind of company am I building? And then look around, is there an accelerator, incubator or a learning or training company out there, or advisors that are really believing in the mission and kind of in yourself as the CEO. Because when you start a company, it's bidding on the people that are building it. We know everybody's going to pivot many, many times along the journey. So I would say let's look for folks that are really mission aligned, that believe in you, and then talk to other entrepreneurs that went through that incubator, ask for introduction and reference calls to really make sure this is the right space for you, because we know time and money are so valuable on your entrepreneurial journey. And then also, when you get to know like early stage, strategic advisors, like, it's all about relationship building. Like start it, reach out to people, get to know them, get their advice, see if it really fuels or glues, and then you kind of invite them on your journey, because this is not going to be a short journey. Usually it's like multiple years, and you really start building that circle of support around you that helps you on your roller coaster days, because they will happen more than you will imagine.
When we built our advisory board, very much like Angie's talking about, I think building your advisory board is a lot like, that saying, like, never go cheap on a lawyer. Like, you've got to, if you're in trouble and you need a lawyer, you pay for the best lawyer you can get, with your advisors. It's the same thing, but don't think that right out of the gate, you're going to be able to land a whale. You use that advisor base, start small, and then kind of use the credibility of who you're bringing in to kind of work your way up the food chain. I'd say the same is true with any kind of accelerator program. You go for the best you can get, because that credibility is going to rub off on you. And your investors are certainly going to look at where you've been. They're going to use that as like a credential.
And just to follow up on that, on the advisor front for young entrepreneurs or first-time entrepreneurs, I personally think it's really helpful to have someone that's been there before on your advisory team, and that could be a mentor, it could be a professor at your university, anyone like that. But when I look at startups and I see a first-time entrepreneur, it gives me comfort to have some validation that there is someone here that's seen it before. It's not an always. It definitely isn't a necessity. But if there is someone on the advisory board that has experience, either technical experience in this area or experience on the business side, I find that goes a long way. As far as the incubator accelerator question, one good thing is just to look at where the money comes from for these programs and who's backing this up, and see, like Angie said, if there's mission alignment, not just with the accelerator incubator, but also with the companies that are behind it. And also those companies behind it are potential partners in the future. So it's good to find, to make sure that there's alignment on that side.
That's great. Thank you very much. And I want to thank the panel. I think it's time to bring this to a close. I want to thank the panel very much. That was really excellent points you raised. There were really good questions in chat that you addressed many of those questions right in chat. So thanks, everybody. Thank you to the audience. This was the record audience for the Startup Monterey Bay Connect. Even going back to our tech meetup days, this is a record audience. So really great that the panelists rose to the occasion and did an excellent job. So let's roll forward to close here. Reminder to stay updated, subscribe to the IIED monthly newsletter. And what's next? Special thanks to our sponsors, Cal State Monterey Bay keeps us going, Startup Monterey Bay, that's us, and the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership for their marketing support. Looking forward, October, we'll be back on October 12th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. In October, we're going to do a special preview of the DART Symposium that's later in October, the Drones Automation and Robotics Technology Symposium. So that will be our topic for October. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. We'll see you at the SICC event on the 23rd. Everybody have a great night. And thanks again, finally, to the panel.